There is a moment in your life when you realize something uncomfortable, something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It's not the world that's disturbing you. It's not people. It's not your enemies, your friends, your family, or even those who have wronged you. It's you. Not because you are weak, but because you were never taught how to control what happens inside your mind. You were taught how to react, not how to remain unmoved. And that is why a simple comment can ruin your entire day. That is why one act of disrespect can stay in your head for hours, sometimes days. That is why someone else's behavior has so much power over your emotions, your peace, and your direction in life. But there is a different way to live. A way where insults lose their power. A way where disrespect no longer controls your mood. A way where chaos happens around you, but never within you. This is the mindset that built men who could stand in the middle of storms without shaking. Men who were betrayed, insulted, misunderstood, yet remained calm, focused, and in control. Men like Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire while facing constant war and personal loss, yet wrote to himself about patience, discipline, and inner peace. Men like Epictetus, who was born a slave, endured hardship most people could not imagine, yet taught that no man is truly free unless he has control over his own mind. They understood something that most people today still don't understand. You don't suffer because of what happens. You suffer because of how you interpret what happens. And once you see this clearly, everything begins to change. Because if your anger is created by your interpretation, then it can also be controlled by your interpretation. If your frustration comes from your judgment, then your peace comes from mastering that judgment. This is not theory. This is not motivation. This is a skill, a discipline, a way of seeing the world that, once mastered, makes you almost untouchable. Imagine walking into any situation, and nothing rattles you. Imagine being insulted, and feeling nothing. Imagine facing pressure, and becoming even calmer. Imagine dealing with difficult people, and never losing control of yourself. That level of power is available to you. But it requires something most people are not willing to do. It requires responsibility. It requires you to stop blaming people and start mastering yourself. Because the truth is simple, and most people hate it when they hear it. No one can make you angry without your permission. And once you fully understand that, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Because now, your peace is no longer negotiable. Now your emotions are no longer controlled by the outside world. Now you become the one thing most people can never be: unshakable. In this video, you are going to learn exactly how to reach that level. Not by suppressing your emotions, not by pretending things don't affect you, but by understanding how your mind works and taking full control of it. By the end of this, you will see anger differently. You will see people differently. And most importantly, you will see yourself differently. And when that shift happens, you will never go back to who you used to be. Stay with this until the end. Because what you're about to learn can completely change the way you experience life. And when you're done watching, I want you to do something simple. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if this gives you real value, subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning of what you're about to master. The illusion of control. You believe your problem is people. You believe your problem is how they talk to you, how they treat you, how they behave. But that belief is the very thing keeping you trapped. Because as long as you think your peace depends on what others do, you will never have peace. You will always be reacting. always adjusting, always hoping people behave in a way that makes you feel okay. And that is a losing game. There is a principle that separates those who are constantly disturbed from those who remain calm no matter what happens. It is simple, but it is not easy. There are things you can control, and there are things you cannot. And most people spend their entire lives trying to control what is not theirs to control. They try to control how people see them. They try to control how people respond to them. They try to control outcomes, situations, and circumstances that were never in their hands to begin with. And every time reality doesn't match their expectations, they suffer. Not because something terrible happened, but because they expected something different. This is where anger is born. This is where frustration grows. This is where your peace begins to slip away. Because you are fighting reality instead of understanding it. Look closely at your life. How many times have you been upset because someone didn't act the way you wanted? How many times have you been bothered because things didn't go according to your plan? How many times have you carried anger, not because of what happened, but because of what you expected to happen? This is the illusion. The illusion that you have control over anything outside yourself. The truth is, you don't. You don't control people. You don't control their opinions. You don't control their actions. You don't control whether they respect you, ignore you, misunderstand you, or even betray you. And once you truly accept that, something powerful happens. You stop wasting energy. You stop reacting to every little thing. You stop trying to fix people who don't want to be fixed. You stop expecting the world to bend to your preferences. And instead, you turn inward. Because there is only one place where your control is absolute. Your thoughts. Your judgments. Your reactions. That is your domain. That is your power. And that is what most people neglect. They train their bodies. They chase money. They try to build status. But they never train the one thing that determines the quality of their entire life. Their mind. That's why someone can have everything and still be angry, still be triggered, still be controlled by what others say or do, because they never learned this one truth. You don't control what happens to you, but you always control how you respond. And that response is everything. It determines whether you stay calm or lose control, whether you move forward or stay stuck, whether you rise above situations or get dragged into them. This is not about becoming emotionless. This is about becoming disciplined. Because there is a difference. An undisciplined mind reacts instantly. It gets angry quickly. It takes things personally. It assumes the worst. It gives people power they don't deserve. But a disciplined mind observes before reacting, questions before judging, understands before responding, and most importantly, chooses peace over chaos. This is the shift you must make. From reacting to choosing. From blaming to understanding. From trying to control the world to mastering yourself. Because once you do, people can talk and you remain calm. Situations can change and you remain steady. Chaos can happen and you remain in control. That is real power. Not the power to control others, but the power to control yourself in a world where nothing else is guaranteed. And most people will never reach this level, because it requires letting go of something they are addicted to. The need to be right. The need to be respected by everyone. The need for things to go their way. But if you can let go of that, If you can truly understand what is in your control and what is not, then you are already stepping into a level of peace that most people will never experience. And this is only the beginning. Because understanding this principle is one thing, but applying it in real life, especially when emotions are high, that is where the real work begins. 2. Why people trigger you, and how to stop it completely. You don't get triggered because of people. You get triggered because of meaning. That is the part most people never understand. Two people can hear the same words and react completely differently. One laughs it off. The other feels disrespected, angry, and hurt. Same situation. Different reaction. Why? Because the pain is not in what was said. It is in the meaning you attach to what was said. Someone ignores your message. One part of you immediately says, "They don't respect me. They're looking down on me. They think I'm not important." And just like that, your mood changes. Your energy drops. Your mind starts creating stories that may not even be true. Now you're irritated, not because of what actually happened, but because of what you decided it meant. This is how the mind works when it is not trained. It fills in gaps with assumptions. It creates conclusions without evidence. It reacts to interpretations as if they were facts. And the dangerous part is this: you believe those interpretations. You don't question them. You don't pause to examine them. You just react. And that reaction becomes your reality. This is why one small incident can ruin your entire day. Because your mind keeps replaying it, adding more meaning, making it bigger than it actually is. But here is the truth that changes everything. Events are neutral. People's actions are neutral. It is your judgment that gives them power. When someone speaks to you harshly, that is just sound. When someone ignores you, that is just an action. When someone disrespects you, that is their behavior. None of these things carry meaning on their own. You are the one who assigns meaning. And once you see that clearly, you realize something powerful. If you are the one creating the meaning, then you can also change the meaning. That is where your freedom begins. Instead of immediately reacting, you pause. You step back. You ask yourself a simple question. What else could this mean? Maybe they ignored you because they're busy. Maybe they spoke harshly because they're stressed. Maybe their behavior has nothing to do with you at all. And even if it does, even if someone truly disrespects you, you still have a choice. You can choose to let it control you, or you can choose to remain in control of yourself. This is what separates emotional people from disciplined people. Emotional people react to the first meaning that enters their mind. Disciplined people question that meaning before they respond. They don't give their power away so easily. They don't allow every small action to disturb their peace. They understand that most things are not worth their energy. And that understanding changes everything. Because once you stop taking things personally, you stop suffering unnecessarily. You stop turning small moments into big problems. You stop allowing people to control your internal state. This doesn't mean you accept bad behavior. It means you don't let it destroy your peace. You can still set boundaries. You can still walk away. You can still respond when necessary. But you do it from a place of control. Not from emotion. Not from anger. Not from ego. Because anger feels powerful in the moment. But it always leaves you weaker. It clouds your judgment. It makes you say things you regret. It puts you in a position where you are reacting instead of leading. And once you are reacting, you are no longer in control. The real strength is in restraint. The real strength is in choosing not to be affected. The real strength is in seeing clearly when others are acting blindly. That is what you are building here. A mind that does not jump to conclusions. A mind that does not get easily disturbed. A mind that stays steady, no matter what happens. Because when you reach that level, people lose the ability to control you. Their words lose their weight. Their actions lose their impact. And you begin to move through life with a different kind of confidence. Not loud, not aggressive, but calm, grounded, and unshakable. And that kind of presence is something very few people ever achieve. But you're starting to see it now. And once you see it, you can unsee it. 3. How to destroy anger at its root. Deep mental discipline. Anger feels instant. It feels automatic. It feels like something that just happens to you. But that is an illusion. Because anger is not the first reaction. It is the final result of a chain you don't usually see. Something happens. Then your mind interprets it. Then it judges it. Then it labels it as wrong, unfair, disrespectful, or offensive. And only after that, anger appears. Which means anger is not the problem. Your judgment is. If you can interrupt the process before the judgment becomes emotional, you stop anger before it even begins. But that requires awareness. Because most people don't even notice the moment their mind starts judging. It happens too fast. Someone says something. And instantly the mind says, "That's disrespectful. That's stupid. That's not how things should be." And from that moment, the emotion is already building. So the goal is not to fight anger after it shows up. The goal is to catch the judgment before it turns into anger. That is where your power is. And it starts with something very simple, but very difficult to practice. Pause. Not a long pause. Just a moment. A moment where you refuse to react immediately. A moment where you create space between what happens and how you respond. In that space, you regain control. Because without that space, you are just reacting on autopilot. And autopilot is dangerous. Because it is built from habits, conditioning, past experiences, and ego. It is not built from clarity. It is not built from discipline. It is not built from truth. So when you pause, you interrupt that automatic cycle. You give yourself the chance to see what is actually happening. Not what your emotions are telling you, but what is real. And most of the time, what is real is much smaller than what your mind is making it. A comment is just a comment. A mistake is just a mistake. A delay is just a delay. But your mind turns it into something bigger. Something personal. Something emotional. And that is what you must stop. Not by forcing yourself to be calm, but by seeing clearly. Because clarity dissolves unnecessary emotion. Once you see that your anger is coming from your interpretation, not the situation itself, it loses its grip on you. Now you are no longer trapped inside the emotion. You are observing it. And that changes everything. Because you cannot be controlled by something you can observe. So when anger begins to rise, instead of reacting, you do something different. You step back internally. And you ask, what exactly am I reacting to? Is it what happened, or what I think it means? Am I seeing this clearly, or am I exaggerating it? These questions slow everything down. They weaken the emotional charge. They bring you back to control. And then, you choose your response. Not based on emotion, but based on who you want to be. This is where discipline replaces impulse. This is where strength replaces reaction. Because anyone can react. Anyone can get angry. Anyone can lose control. That is easy. But staying calm when everything in you wants to react. That is mastery. That is rare. That is what puts you in a different class of people entirely. And here is something most people will never admit. Anger is often tied to ego. You feel disrespected because you believe you should be respected at all times. You feel offended because you believe people should speak to you a certain way. You feel frustrated because reality is not matching your expectations. And when those expectations are violated, your ego reacts. But the truth is, the world does not owe you anything. People are not required to behave the way you want. Situations are not required to go your way. And once you accept that, anger starts to lose its foundation. Because now, you are no longer surprised when things don't go your way. You are no longer shocked when people act out of character. You are no longer emotionally shaken by things you cannot control. You expect less from the world and demand more from yourself. That is the shift. From expecting to preparing. From reacting to choosing. From being controlled to being in control. And once you reach that level, anger no longer controls your behavior. It becomes something you can see, understand, and let go of, without suppressing it, without pretending it's not there, but by refusing to give it power over your actions. That is true control, and most people will never develop it, because it requires patience. It requires practice. It requires you to go against your natural impulses. But if you do, if you commit to this level of awareness, you will notice something powerful. Situations that used to trigger you no longer affect you. People who used to get under your skin lose their impact. Moments that used to ruin your day become insignificant. And slowly, you become the kind of person who cannot be easily disturbed. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. The Stoic way to handle disrespect and difficult people. Disrespect is one of the fastest ways to lose control of yourself. Not because it is powerful, but because you believe it is. Someone talks to you in a way you don't like. Someone ignores you. Someone underestimates you. Someone challenges you in public. And instantly, something rises inside you. A need to respond. A need to correct them. A need to defend your image. A need to prove something. And in that moment, most people lose. Not because the other person is stronger, but because they got pulled into a reaction. And once you react emotionally, you are no longer in control. You are being controlled. This is where most people misunderstand strength. They think strength is responding quickly. They think strength is raising their voice. They think strength is putting someone in their place immediately. But that is not strength. That is impulse. Real strength is much quieter. Real strength is measured. Real strength is the ability to stand in front of disrespect and remain untouched internally. Because the truth is simple. Disrespect only affects you if you accept it. If someone calls you something that is not true, why should it disturb you? If someone speaks from ignorance, why should you take it personally? If someone is trying to provoke you, Why would you give them exactly what they want? Most people don't think this way. They react without questioning. They feel attacked and immediately go on defense. But a disciplined mind does something different. It observes the person. It asks, what kind of person behaves like this? Because behavior always reveals something. A disrespectful person is not powerful. They are often insecure. They are often frustrated. They are often lacking control over their own emotions. And instead of dealing with themselves, they project it onto others. Once you understand this, you stop seeing disrespect as something personal. You start seeing it as information. Information about the other person's mindset, their discipline, their level of awareness. And that changes how you respond. Because now, you are no longer reacting emotionally. You are responding intelligently. Sometimes the strongest response is silence. Not because you are weak, but because you understand that not everything deserves your energy. Silence can be powerful. It can confuse people. It can expose them. It can show that you are not easily moved. But silence is only powerful when it comes from control, not from fear. Because there is also a time to speak, a time to set boundaries, a time to make it clear what you accept and what you don't. But even then, you don't speak from anger. You don't speak from ego. You speak from clarity. Calm, direct, unemotional. Because when you speak without emotional charge, your words carry more weight. They are more precise, more effective, more respected, and most importantly, you remain in control of yourself. This is what most people fail to understand. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's about mastering yourself within conflict. Because difficult people will always exist. Disrespect will always exist. Challenges will always exist. You cannot remove these things from life, but you can remove their power over you. And that is what makes you dangerous in the best way. Because now, people cannot easily provoke you. They cannot easily manipulate your emotions. They cannot pull you into unnecessary drama. And when they try, they fail. Because you are no longer reacting the way they expect. This is where you begin to separate yourself from the majority. Because most people are predictable. They react the same way every time. They get angry. They argue. They try to win emotionally. But you become unpredictable. Sometimes you say nothing. Sometimes you respond calmly. Sometimes you walk away. Sometimes you address it directly, without emotion. And because of that, people don't know how to control you. They don't know how to get under your skin. They don't know how to move you. And that creates a different kind of respect. Not forced. Not demanded. But earned through your presence. Through your control. Through your refusal to be dragged into unnecessary battles. Because not every fight is worth fighting. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every person deserves your attention. And once you understand that, you become more selective, more intentional, more focused. You stop wasting energy on things that don't matter. You stop engaging in arguments that lead nowhere. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who are not worth it. And that frees you. Because your energy is now directed toward things that actually improve your life. Your growth. Your goals. Your discipline. Your peace. This is what gives you an advantage most people don't have. While they are distracted, you are focused. While they are reacting, you are building. While they are losing control, you are strengthening control. And over time, that difference becomes massive. Because life rewards those who can stay steady under pressure. Those who can think clearly when others are emotional. Those who can act with discipline when others act on impulse. And all of that starts here. With how you handle disrespect. Not by avoiding it, but by mastering your response to it. Because once you do, you don't just become calmer, you become untouchable. How to become emotionally untouchable in any situation. There is a level beyond self-control, beyond patience, beyond trying not to react. It is the state where nothing external can pull you out of yourself anymore. Not insults, not delays, not betrayal, not disrespect, not failure, not praise either. Because emotional control is not just about resisting negative emotions. It is about becoming independent from external events entirely. Most people live like emotional machines. Something good happens, they feel up. Something bad happens, they crash. Someone praises them, they feel powerful. Someone criticizes them, they feel small. Their entire emotional world is built on what other people do, which means they are never really in control. They are just responding, reacting, shifting, adjusting, but never stable, never grounded, never truly free. To become emotionally untouchable means something very different. It means your internal state is no longer decided by external events. It is decided by your interpretation and your discipline. You stop being a mirror for the world. You stop reflecting everything that happens around you. Instead, you become a center. Stable. Anchored. Unmoved. This does not happen by accident. It is built through repeated mental discipline, through awareness, through repetition of a new way of seeing life. And it starts with identity. Because you cannot behave in a stable way if you still see yourself as someone who gets affected easily. You must begin to see yourself differently. Not as someone who reacts, but as someone who observes. Not as someone who is controlled by emotion, but as someone who understands emotion. There is a difference. One is inside the emotion. The other is above it. When you are inside emotion, everything feels urgent. Everything feels personal. Everything feels like it must be responded to immediately. But when you are above emotion, you see the emotion forming. You recognize it. You understand it. But you are not trapped inside it. That distance is everything. Because in that distance, you regain choice. And choice is the foundation of control. Most people think emotional strength means not feeling anything. That is wrong. Emotional strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to feel without being controlled, to experience anger without becoming it, to experience frustration without acting from it, to experience disappointment without collapsing into it. That is mastery. And it is rare, because most people are not trained to observe themselves. They are trained to obey their emotions. Whatever they feel, they follow. Whatever arises, they act on. But the disciplined mind interrupts that pattern. It creates space between feeling and action. And in that space, power exists. For example, someone says something that normally would irritate you. The old version of you reacts immediately, replies fast, raises tone, feels disrespected, wants to fix the situation instantly. But the new version of you does something different. It notices the emotional spike. It acknowledges it. But it does not obey it. It waits. It watches. And in that waiting, the intensity fades. Because emotions are temporary waves. They rise fast, but they also fall fast. Most people make their biggest mistakes in the peak of emotion. But emotionally disciplined people never decide at the peak. They decide after clarity returns. And clarity always returns if you allow space for it. This is why silence is powerful. This is why delay is powerful. This is why pausing is powerful. Not because you are doing nothing, but because you are preventing emotional hijacking. You are taking control back from impulse. And slowly, over time, this changes your entire personality. You stop being easily excited by praise. You stop being easily broken by criticism. You stop being easily moved by circumstances. And people begin to notice something different about you. You don't react like others. You don't get emotional like others. You don't lose control like others. You feel steady, predictable in behavior, but unpredictable in emotional reaction. And that makes you hard to manipulate. Because manipulation requires emotional access. If someone can make you angry easily, they can control your decisions. If someone can make you fearful easily, they can control your actions. If someone can make you desperate easily, they can control your choices. But when emotional control is strong, manipulation loses its grip. Because there is nothing to trigger, nothing to push, nothing to pull. You become internally anchored. And from that place, you begin to operate differently in life. You don't chase validation. You don't react to pressure. You don't compete emotionally with people. You simply move with intention, quiet confidence, calm presence, clear thinking. And this is where life begins to open up for you. Because emotional stability affects everything. Your relationships become calmer. Your decisions become better. Your focus becomes sharper. Your discipline becomes stronger. Your respect for yourself increases. And people respond differently to you. Not because you are louder, but because you are stable. And stability is rare. In a world full of emotional reactions, the person who stays steady stands out without trying. That is what untouchable really means. Not someone who feels nothing, but someone who cannot be easily moved. Someone who has built a mind strong enough to observe life without being consumed by it. And once you reach this point, you don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to argue. You don't need to convince. You don't need to react to everything. Because your peace is no longer negotiable. It is protected. It is trained. It is chosen. Practical Stoic techniques to rewire your reactions. Understanding Stoicism is not enough. Feeling inspired is not enough. Even agreeing with everything you've heard so far is not enough. Because nothing changes in your life until your reactions change in real time. In real situations. When emotions are high. When pressure is real. When your ego is triggered. That is where transformation either happens or collapses. So the question becomes simple. How do you actually rewire your reactions? How do you stop becoming angry automatically? How do you train your mind to respond differently when life pushes your buttons? The answer is not theory. It is practice. Simple mental techniques applied repeatedly until they become your default way of thinking. The first technique is awareness before reaction. Most people live after the reaction has already started. They realize they are angry only after they are already angry. But training begins earlier. At the moment of trigger, you must learn to notice the first signal, not the full emotion, the beginning of it, the slight irritation, the tightening in your chest, the shift in your thoughts. That is your signal. And the moment you notice it, you interrupt it, not by suppressing it, but by observing it. You say internally, "This is anger starting," not, "I am angry." There is a difference. "I am angry" means identity. "This is anger" means observation. One traps you inside the emotion. The other creates distance from it. That distance is where control begins. The second technique is controlled delay. This is one of the most powerful Stoic tools. Never respond immediately when emotionally activated. Not in messages. Not in conversations. Not in decisions. Give it time. Even a few seconds can change everything. Because emotions are temporary spikes. They peak quickly, then fall. But if you react at the peak, you act at your worst state. You attach meaning to everything. Someone ignores you. They don't respect me. Someone disagrees with you. They are against me. Someone succeeds. I am less. But Stoic discipline teaches you something different. Not everything is about you. Not everything is personal. Not everything requires a reaction. When you stop personalizing events, you stop suffering unnecessarily. Because most things people do have nothing to do with you. They are dealing with their own emotions, their own stress, their own perspective, their own limitations. But your mind interprets it as personal. And that interpretation creates emotional damage. So you remove the attachment. You see things as events, not attacks. The fifth technique is response selection. This is where true control is shown. Because even after awareness, even after delay, even after reframing, you still must choose what to do. And this is where most people fail again. They think every emotion deserves expression. It does not. Not every thought deserves action. Not every feeling deserves a response. Sometimes the best response is none at all. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is distance. Sometimes it is calm acknowledgement and moving on. And sometimes it is direct communication without emotion. But the key is this. You choose. You are not forced. You are not dragged. You are not controlled by impulse. You are selecting your response like a disciplined thinker. And every time you do this correctly, you strengthen the neural pathway of control and weaken the pathway of reaction. Over time, this becomes automatic. Not because emotions disappear, but because your response changes. And that is the real transformation. Because life will still bring triggers. People will still act unexpectedly. Situations will still challenge you. But your reaction will no longer be the same. You will begin to feel something different inside those moments. Space. Clarity. Control. And that space changes everything. Because inside that space, you are no longer a victim of emotion. You are the observer of it. And from that position, you can act wisely instead of impulsively. You can speak clearly instead of emotionally. You can choose peace instead of chaos. And that is the foundation of Stoic living. Not perfection, not suppression, but trained response, repetition, awareness, and control. And once this becomes part of you, your entire experience of life changes. Because nothing outside of you gains automatic power anymore. You decide what matters. You decide what affects you. You decide what deserves your energy. And everything else fades into the background, becoming completely unbothered in real life. There is a point in personal discipline where you stop trying to handle emotions, and you simply stop being controlled by them in the first place. This is the final shift. Not suppression, not management, not control in the usual sense, but detachment from unnecessary disturbance altogether. At this level, life still happens. People still behave the way they want. Situations still unfold without your permission. Words are still spoken. Mistakes still occur. Disappointments still appear. But something fundamental changes inside you. None of it owns your attention anymore. You are no longer emotionally available to everything. And that changes everything. Most people are emotionally open all the time. Anything can enter. Anything can disturb them. Anything can shift their mood. A message, a tone, a look, a delay, a comment, a memory. Their mind is like an unlocked door, and life walks in whenever it wants. But the disciplined mind is different. It is selective. It is guarded. Not in a defensive, fearful way, but in a conscious, intentional way. You begin to realize something very important. Your attention is your life. Whatever you consistently react to becomes your mental environment. If you react to chaos, you live in chaos internally. If you react to disrespect, you live in constant conflict internally. If you react to everything, you are never at peace anywhere. So the final step is not just controlling reactions. It is reducing what you react to. You stop giving importance to things that do not deserve your energy. Not because they don't exist, but because they don't deserve residence in your mind. And this is where emotional freedom is born. You begin to observe people without absorbing them. You hear things without carrying them. You see situations without internalizing them. And slowly, your mind becomes quieter. Not empty, but selective. And in that selectiveness, peace becomes natural. You are no longer fighting to stay calm. You are simply not engaging with what disturbs calmness. This is where emotional independence begins. You stop waiting for people to behave better so you can feel better. You stop depending on circumstances to align before you are peaceful. You stop negotiating your inner state with external conditions. Instead, your peace becomes self-generated, independent, stable, and reliable. And this is something most people will never experience, because they are waiting for the world to cooperate first. But the world has never cooperated consistently with anyone. Not the strong, not the weak, not the rich, not the poor. Everyone is tested. Everyone is challenged. Everyone is confronted with situations they don't like. The difference is not what happens to people. The difference is what happens inside people when it happens. At this final level, you begin to notice something strange. Things that used to irritate you don't even register anymore. Not because you are ignoring life, but because your mind is no longer overprocessing everything. It is no longer overreacting, no longer overpersonalizing, no longer overthinking every detail. It becomes calm by default. And calmness, when it becomes default, is powerful. Because now you are no longer trying to control your emotions in real time. You have already trained yourself to not generate unnecessary emotional reactions. And that is real mastery. People might still try to provoke you, but there is nothing to trigger. People might still expect reactions from you, but you no longer operate at that level. You respond when needed, and you stay silent when it is not. You engage when it is useful, and you disengage when it is not. You are no longer emotionally reactive by identity. You are intentional by identity. And that is a completely different way of living. Because now your energy is not being constantly leaked into irrelevant things. You are not mentally exhausted from overreacting. You are not emotionally drained from constant internal conflict. You are not stuck in cycles of anger, regret, or frustration. Instead, you are steady, focused, present, and internally quiet. This is what most people call being unbothered. But it is not ignorance. It is discipline. It is clarity. It is emotional intelligence refined over time. And when you reach this level, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop needing validation for your calmness. You stop proving your emotional strength. You stop explaining why you are not reacting. You simply are. And that presence alone begins to change how people interact with you. Because people naturally feel when someone cannot be easily disturbed. They sense it in your tone, in your pauses, in your reactions, or lack of them. And without saying anything, you communicate control, not dominance, not arrogance, but stability. And stability is rare enough that it commands attention on its own. But more importantly, you begin to enjoy your own mind. You are no longer trapped inside emotional noise. You are no longer mentally fighting invisible battles all day. You are no longer constantly disturbed by things that don't matter in the long run. Instead, you are free to think clearly, work deeply, live intentionally, and move through life with calm authority. This is the final level. Not perfection, not emotional numbness, but freedom from unnecessary disturbance. And once you understand this, you realize something very important. Peace was never something you had to chase. It was something you had to stop losing. If you've made it this far, then you now understand something most people will never fully grasp in their lifetime. Anger is not power. Reaction is not strength. Emotional outbursts are not control. They are loss of control disguised as expression. And the real shift you've been learning throughout this video is simple. You don't need to eliminate emotions. You need to stop being controlled by them. Because life will always present situations that test you. People will always say things you don't like. Circumstances will always shift without your permission. That part of life will never change. But your response can. And that is where your power has always been. Not in controlling the world, but in controlling yourself within it. At this point, you've seen the pattern clearly. You've seen how anger is formed. You've seen how meaning creates emotion. You've seen how judgment shapes reaction. And you've seen how awareness breaks the cycle completely. So the question is no longer, do you understand this? The real question is, will you practice it when it matters? Because understanding without application changes nothing. And discipline is not built in calm moments. It is built in triggered moments. In conversations where you want to react. In situations where your ego wants to speak first. In moments where silence feels uncomfortable. That is where mastery is developed. Not in theory, but in real time. And if you start applying even a small part of what you've learned here, you will begin to notice something powerful. You will pause more, react less, think clearer, and feel lighter. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop making it heavier. And over time, you will realize something most people never realize. Peace was never missing. It was just being interrupted by unnecessary reactions. Now, before you leave this video, I want you to do two simple things. First, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. Let's see how far this message is reaching. And second, if this video gave you real value, don't just watch it and move on. Subscribe to the channel. Because this is where we build discipline. This is where we master the mind. And this is where you learn how to stay unshaken in a world that constantly tries to shake you. Stay consistent. Stay aware. And most importantly, stay in control of yourself.